Hello, my name is Angad Kalon, and this is my midterm presentation for Comp 420, which is Computers and Society. And the topic I chose was related to cybersecurity, and within cybersecurity specifically, I chose the Equifax breach that happened in 2017. And so I actually researched about this breach and have a separate essay that goes into a lot deeper detail. However, this is my video presentation in which I'm going to go over the main points or ideas related to the Equifax breach, like what happened, what were some issues, especially some ethical ones, and some improvements to try to prevent these type of events from happening in the future. So before we get to the issues and the improvements area, it's first important to understand what exactly happened in this Equifax breach. So basically, the Equifax breach is said to be one of the largest personal information data breaches in history. In this data breach, millions of people in the United States, along with millions in the UK, and a couple thousand people in Canada lost their personal information. That included data like names, date of births, driver license numbers, social insurance numbers, and so on. So, to get a clearer understanding of exactly what happened, I created this timeline right here, which just shows what really happened. And this started in, well, you could say the timeline I've made is starting in 2016, but the main breach happened in 2017. I wanted to include this 2016 aspect to it because it's a really important point of what happened and what could be prevented. So, Motherboard, or by Vice, which is a tech magazine or science magazine, for fun, some of the reporters there tried logging into the Equifax system, which is run by Apache Struts. That's a software company that provides software to companies. So they found the systems to be insecure for Equifax. They could easily just log in as an employee and access information. So after that, that happened December of 2016, and Equifax took no initiative or no action to fix their systems. So we start. So time passes on, and March 6th of 2017 comes when Apache Struts, which was a software company, announces a vulnerability in their software and releases a patch for that vulnerability on that same day. So the following day, on March 7th, what happens is that the US Department of Home Security alerts Equifax and every other company that was using Apache Struts to apply the patch before an attack could happen. Sorry. Just 2 days later, on March 9th of 2017, Equifax's internal organization emails the IT department at Equifax to apply the patch within 48 hours. And something happens there. We don't know if it's human error or if it's done on purpose, but that patch did not apply to all the devices at Equifax. And so, 2 months later, on May the 13th of 2017, some attackers finally exploit that vulnerability and enter the Equifax network, similar to how Motherboard had entered in earlier. And so this attack goes on from May the 13th all the way until July 29th, when Equifax finally discovers a breach due to some suspicious activity. And the next day, on July 30th, the web application of Equifax is taken down. And just a few days later, on August 2nd, Equifax hires a cybersecurity firm to investigate what's happening. And more than a month later, on September 7th, is when the true extent of the breach is revealed to the public. So the public don't find out until September the 7th. And I also want to show this little diagram here that shows the magnitude of the breach of what happened. So how big was that Equifax hack or breach? Well, there's 143 million records of just the United States, people in the United States, plus around 15-ish million in the UK, and plus 19,000 Canadians as well. So this was an attack of huge proportions. And according to my research, the key factors that led to this breach were that there were many ethical and a security issue that combined that led to this massive data breach where customers lost a lot of important personal data. So, talking about the issues, so if we talk about the security issue first, the main security issue was that they didn't have that proper cybersecurity infrastructure in place to prevent this type of an event from happening. So, like we saw with motherboard, they had found that their system wasn't they didn't have that proper infrastructure. Their infrastructure was inadequate to prevent an attack or uh, somebody to exploit that vulnerability. So that was the main security issue. But in addition to that, there was a lot of ethical issues behind this attack. Equifax violated many standard business ethical ideas that we talked about in Comp 420. Like, it was clear that Equifax didn't stay true to their promise of protection of data they made with their consumers or customers because they didn't invest or prioritize investing in cybersecurity, and the response by the IT department where they didn't apply that patch to every device and had a delayed reaction is a clear sign, of breaking that promise. So they really underestimated the need for quick action, and that's contributing to that broken promise of data protection to the consumer. And then another large ethical issue that was created by Equifax that did not lead to the attack, but was an ethical issue in general with Equifax, was a lack of transparency and disclosure from them. So if we go back to the timeline, we can see that they found out about the attack on, let's say, July 30th. But they didn't reveal it until more than a month later to the public. So there's clear evidence that there's a lack of transparency, and the fact that there was not enough communication or disclosure with the consumer is a really big ethical issue. Business ethics includes the need to have that transparent communication with your consumers or customers about where their information and data is. Because at the end of the day, the data is the consumers or customers. It's the company can use it, they can store it, but it's their data and they should know what's happening to their data. Additionally, to add on to this list of ethical issues, there's also some concerns raised with Equifax not complying with the regulations and disregarding established standards that protect consumer rights, and a big case that fell on them was about corruption. Because the day they found out about the breach, the executives sold millions of dollars worth of shares before publicly disclosing the breach. And so they took advantage of that in between time of discovering and announcing the breach. And selling all the shares like that is a really big ethical issue, as it is kind of an act of corruption in which Equifax executives are prioritizing their profits more than their ethics and commitment to their consumers or customers. And actually, this graph here shows um, when the stock price or share prices drop. So we can see after that announcement in around September that Equifax share drops a lot, and they had sold it already by then, the executives. So, despite whatever happened and all the issues, there is plenty of room for improvement. So, in class, we learned about the CIA, which stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And there's many little actions inside each one that the companies can take, like Equifax could take. So, like one of those could be like data minimization. So, we're in data minimization. What happens is that you only keep the essential information. So what happens in companies like Equifax is that they have a really big centralized area with so much data packed into one spot, and they're prone to huge attacks and breaches like this. Therefore, with the data minimization, we can minimize or remove data not needed. Basically, the company keeps the essential information and unnecessary information is removed. And data is stored in a decentralized models or in separate sections. And what this does is that it helps maintain security and helps maintain customer privacy, which in return helps fulfill the ethical aspect and that promise. And it also helps with data storage as well, which is going to help the company's cost. It's a win-win situation for both sides. And then another important action that Equifax needs to do or could have done at that time was to prevent such a situation was stricter access control. So like we saw in that 2016 report done by Motherhood, they could easily they just easily entered into the employee portal and accessed important information. So it's important for companies like Equifax to limit the number of people that can enter secure systems or areas that contain critical personal and private data. That way, the danger of unauthorized access can be prevented. And an ethical issue that they should have worked on is transparent communication. Um, they if they had transparent communication, even if they had that breach, they could have maintained that trust. They could maintain that trust with the consumer customers, because the customers will see that they're transparently communicating. Additionally, training plans for employees to teach them about ethical concepts and business ethics were and severely needed. For example, with the IT department, they delayed implementing the patch. Now, I'm not sure, as it's not really clear why that delay happened, but either they didn't know or either they did it on purpose, and either way they should have had training beforehand. The same goes for the rest of the company, where the whole company should have had a company wide plan on what happens when we have a breach, and what, if that does happen, what should we do following that breach. And not only for the employee and company, there should have been training for how to deal with the consumers. So, what happened in this attack was that the governments provided the consumers with information and resources on what to do, but the company provided basically no information except for the settlement that we can see here. And so the company didn't provide any information on how the consumer could protect their data following the breach. Like, for example, a common thing companies say is changing passwords. And so this leads back to that idea of ethics, as it's the duty of the company to ensure that they're keeping their consumers and customer data safe. And a part of keeping it safe is notifying them if it's been lost or breached, and then providing them ways or solutions on what they can do now. So basically, this was an overview of the Equifax attack, and there's a lot of big lessons that we can learn from this attack related to ethical and security standards that lead to data breaches. And so it's really important for companies to understand and follow business ethics, and the importance of the security and ethics standards that can help prevent those breaches and attacks from happening in the future. And both of them are needed. You can't have one and not have the other. So you can't have a strong security foundation but you don't follow ethical practices. If you're missing one of either ethics or security, you're bound to face issues and attacks like what happened with Equifax. So here are my references. You can find these in the essay too. Um, and thank you so much for watching. This was my midterm presentation.